Today we're going to take a look at role-playing an orc as we continue the series of videos on role-playing tips for the different species and making them stand out in your game so that they feel a little bit different from just being another type of human, which is more and more important in versions of the game, the 2024 rules, where ability scores and stuff are not necessarily tied to your character and things. Bringing that role-play element is really helpful. So what does the player's handbook tell us about the orc, first of all? One, they trace their origins to Gruumsh, a powerful god of the material plane. Now, what the player's handbook doesn't tell us is that Gruumsh is a chaotic evil god of tempest and war, known for his unyielding will and destructive power. That's not included in the 2024 player's handbook, but I think the context is important, so I've added it here. Now, Gruumsh gave orcs gifts to help them survive and explore vast landscapes, from plains and caverns to oceans and things like that. And the abilities that Gruumsh gave them were endurance, in order to keep going despite any hardship, determination, a relentless drive to achieve their goals, and dark vision, the ability to see in the dark to aid in their survival. And they maintain and retain these blessings even if they worship other gods, which is something that the player's handbook specifically calls out. Generally, physically, they tend to be tall and quite broad in stature, with grey skin, pointed ears, and tusk-like lower canines. Some orcs grow up with stories of their ancestors' great journeys and deeds, and those stories often lead many to wonder if they too will be called to greatness by the almighty Gruumsh. Others, however, choose to leave old traditions behind and carve out their own destinies by differentiating themselves from their kin's past. That's all well and good in terms of the lore, but how are these things represented mechanically? As a creature type, they are considered humanoid and medium in size, standing at about 6 to 7 feet tall with a speed of 30 feet. So they're fairly standard in terms of their physicality when it comes to comparing other species within the 2024 Player's Handbook. You gain Adrenaline Rush, which allows you to take the dash action as a bonus action, and doing so, giving yourself a number of temporary hit points equal to your proficiency bonus. You can use this trait a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus, which at level 1 will be 2 times, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a short or long rest. This is a really cool feature, which allows you to move about the battlefield quicker than others, at least temporarily. You gain dark vision up to a range of 120 feet, which puts you at the higher echelon of dark vision. I think only dwarves and drow have 120 feet dark vision, so highly gifted indeed in that regard. And you have relentless endurance, so when you're reduced to 0 hit points but aren't killed outright, you drop to 1 hit point instead, which just gives you a little bit of an extra opportunity to try and win the day. And once you use that trait, you can't do so again until you finish a long rest. So there's only so many times that you can get up, or rather specifically, only one time you can stay standing. Now we get to my favorite bit of these roleplay tips videos, which are the questions that you can ask yourself to really bring the lore of the character out to the front of the session to really make your character stand out a little bit more. There are 10 questions that I've put together for you to ask yourself to really try and link your character to the lore of orcs. So 1, what is your connection to Gruumsh, this chaotic evil god of tempest and war? Do you revere him? Do you reject his teachings? Or do you feel a little bit indifferent? And ultimately, how does his legacy of violence influence the choices that you make as an orc? How do you view your endurance and determination that you are gifted by Gruumsh? Do you see them as gifts? Or do you think that they are more burdens from your god of creation, or simply just a part of who you are? What role does strength play in your life? Do you believe that might makes right, that kind of almost Klingon-esque warrior culture that orcs will certainly be known for? Or do you value other qualities alongside physical power? Again, and with a lot of these questions that I've put together, many of them look at different angles from which you as an orc player get to choose whether or not you lean into that kind of dark side of orcs that they have been known for throughout all previous editions of the game, versus breaking free and rejecting those ideas. So you'll see a theme in relation to that, and this is another one. about that physicality. Is that as important to you as it is to, say, other orcs? And how do you feel about your ancestors' great journeys and deeds? Are you inspired to prove yourself, or do you prefer to forge your own path? Again, these stories of these orcs that may have done potentially great things or potentially even dastardly things that your culture might see as great because they're in the name of Gruumsh, this evil god of war and conquest. Do you feel that same draw to those sorts of deeds, or is this something that you would rather reject and find your own way? What drives you to keep pushing forward? Are you seeking personal glory? Perhaps vengeance? Are you looking to find belonging in another society? Or perhaps something else entirely? What's your kind of goal, ultimately? How do others perceive you, and how do you respond? Are you feared, respected, or misunderstood because of your orcish heritage? Now, this is one that's a bit of a tricky one that I would advise talking to your dungeon master about. How are orcs perceived? Ask what they think, and feel free to have a very adult conversation with your DM about where you think orcs should sit. And this is also one of those things that if you are at the right table and it has buy-in from other players, this is an opportunity for you to explore the perception of orcs. And this is probably one that definitely check in with your DM because they might have a bit of a pulse on what your players are willing to explore at the table versus what they're not willing to explore at the table. So they might have a good pulse on it. And if they don't, they might ask your fellow players directly if some of these things are themes that they would like to explore at the table. But ultimately, that is a conversation for you and your dungeon master to have with each other, and potentially also the other players as well, to make sure that there's buy-in from everybody with a lot of those themes. How do you view battle and conflict? Do you embrace combat as a way of life, or do you fight only when necessary? Again, coming back to this theme of the duality of being an orc, do you lean into the kind of warmongering orcish culture that is led by Gruumsh, or is this something that you're going to reject and try and find other ways of living life? What's your relationship with other orcs? Do you have strong ties to your kin, or have you distanced yourself from orcish traditions? Again, and just another angle to consider as to whether or not you're going to lean into the orcs of old or forge your own path. How do you approach challenges and adversity? Do you charge in headfirst, strategize carefully, or use sheer willpower to push through? Charging in headfirst feels very orcish. Using your willpower to push through feels very orcish. Or do you take the strategic approach, which to me feels less orcish, but just as much as these tropes exist, they exist there for you to either lean in or to try and break free from. And those things, even just that on itself, if you follow the more traditional orc views of things in terms of the warmongering and things like that Gruumsh has bestowed upon the orcs, maybe this is where you differentiate yourself. You don't have to differentiate yourself from all of these things. Maybe this is the particular one where actually, whilst you are keen for war and keen to prove yourself in battle, perhaps you're not willing to charge in head first without having formed a plan first, and that will feel quite jarring compared to the rest of the character, for example. What does freedom mean to you? Do you seek to roam the world like your ancestors, or are you looking for a place to settle? Orcs are depicted in the 2024 Player's Handbook as being slightly nomadic, so this one asks that question very directly. So those are my 10 questions for if you're playing an orc and how you can try and differentiate your orc from perhaps some of the other species in the game and some of the other player characters at the table. I will have put together a worksheet that you should be able to download from a link down below for free from our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/BardicQuest. If you download that, you can print that worksheet out, scribble on it, and come up with your answers so you've got it on physical if you want to, or indeed take notes as we're going through this video. But I hope you really found that helpful. I'm really enjoying these videos and giving you guys food for thought on how you can differentiate your characters a little bit. So I hope you found it helpful. If you did, don't forget to give us a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. But that is it from me. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.